Tonight we are going to meet Daniel and also briefly his associates, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. We have heard of the Babylonian captivity. At least we've heard of that if we study the Bible a little bit. The Babylonian captivity, well, Daniel chapter 1 tells us of the beginning of that captivity, that these men were among the thousands of Jews carried away from southern Israel to Babylon, the land of Nebuchadnezzar. We call them Jews, by the way. They were Israelites who lived in the southern part of the nation, and that part of the nation was called Judah. The nation had split in what could be described as a civil war after the time of Solomon because of his wickedness and the sinfulness of his father David. And their rebellion, their personal rebellion, had consequences for the nation, which happens in human history. When the leaders disobey God, the people suffer. And so the kingdom split into the northern 10 tribes, which was called Israel. And the southern kingdom was also Israel, but it was called Judah, named after their most prosperous tribe. And of course, the tribe of King David. David came from the tribe of Judah, and of David's descendants, they were of Judah. So the Jews were carried away from southern Israel to Babylonia, the land of Shinar. About 150 years before this, the northern kingdom was devastated. They were not exiled to Babylon, they were exiled to Assyria, which also was north of Babylon. So the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes as they're called, were exiled to Assyria and they never returned, basically. The southern tribes in Judah were carried away because of their sin. They became weak. God turned his back on them, and they were carried away by Nebuchadnezzar to Babylonia. But that was a punishment that lasted for 70 years, and then they were able to return to rebuild the wall in the time of Nehemiah and to rebuild the temple. And this was largely thanks to courageous individuals like Nehemiah and like Esther, who had saved the Jews. Now, we will see that Daniel's associates were given different names, pagan Babylonian names, and one purpose of God's people is to put his name on everyone so that many can know the joy of becoming his children so that they will be called by his name. Now, pagans, naturally in rebellion against God, they put the name of their gods on everyone and everything in an attempt to obliterate Israel's God, Elohim, also known by Elah, or El, as in Israel and Ezekiel. So please turn to Daniel chapter 1. Daniel chapter 1, in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. So you have two kings of two empires, although Israel's empire was reasonably decimated by the loss of the northern kingdom, and they had all kinds of difficulty with their neighbors because they became weak. I think it's tragic when Christian leaders in America will see an attack on our nation and they'll say that's God's punishment, that God did it. Or in Europe, that the Germans in World War II, they were doing God's bidding. I think that's tragic. But there's another side, another aspect to that does have validity, and that is when a nation turns against God, they become foolish. They lack wisdom, they become selfish and filled with worldly lusts, and that makes them vulnerable. They lose the blessing of God. And so that happened to Israel, but also in this time in history, God was more involved in a supernatural way. And so we'll see God doing the most extraordinary things through Daniel in this book.